week of. Huh. So this is a very special episode of Learn with Bessern. I wanted to discuss about why traditional coaching at work doesn't really work and if there is any way to fix it. So we hear that many companies have started programs to individualize the development of people, and coaching has become kind of the tool of choice to make it happen. And the reason is that companies have realized that developing people cannot be done simply with training. Their current need for agility and transformation requires a model based on rather like learning how to learn rather than the simple transfer of knowledge that you have in a standard training. And not everything is that bright. While coaching is recognized on its impact on productivity, the sad reality is that it fails on its execution. The main reason why it fails in execution is because we tend to make coaching a complex process that is perceived as long and a burden for many people's managers. It is perceived as something we must do on top of being a boss. So, and I wanted to have like kind of a nice discussion about the good side and the dark side of coaching with Meredith Bell. Now, let me tell you about why it's so special today. Meredith is one of the most respected leadership development advisors. She's a reference in the coaching world. She has written a couple of books, like the books called Connect with Your Team, Mastering the Top 10 Communication Skills, or another good book, which is Peer Coaching Made Simple, How to Do the 6 Things That Matter the Most When Helping Someone to Improve a Skill. Now, this is not all. Her book, Connect with Your Team, has been recommended by no other than Ken Blanchard, yes, one of my favorite authors, and also a reference in leadership development. Meredith is also the president and co-founder of Performance Support System, which is focusing communications, but in particular, how do we transform, how do we start practicing communication and make it like a habit, displaying a process of habit formation, using the latest in terms of the learnings of neuroscience and how the brain processes new skills. Now, this is quite good. This is quite interesting. Welcome, Meredith, and welcome to Learn with Bessern.
Thank you, Ivan. I'm so excited to be with you today. Of course, you know I love the topic we're about to discuss, so this is going to be a fun conversation.
Meredith, before we start, I want just to put into context something that is quite revealing about the realities of coaching, is that there are a couple of misconceptions on how corporates are deploying coaching. And this is one of the reasons why coaching fails in terms of having a wider audience, a good understanding of what it is and how it can support people. According to you, what could be these big misconceptions that corporates have regarding coaching?
You know, I think that's such an important question. What are the misconceptions? There are a couple that really stand out to me. And one is not realizing that everyone in an organization needs coaching. Most of the time it's reserved for executives, you know, or higher level folks, because of course they have a great impact within the organization. And that's the traditional perception, is these are the folks who kind of qualify to have a coach. When in reality, anytime we are attempting to improve a skill or improve the way we do things, coaching will accelerate that process dramatically. And so it's logical that everyone can benefit from having a coach. But the thing is, the other misconception is that often they think we've got to bring in an external person, you know, with the right credentials, the right qualifications to perform that function, when in reality, there are internal resources that can be tapped into, such as people coaching each other or managers learning how to be coaches to their employees. And many times organizations haven't thought about it in that way. And so they don't provide coaching because they have a more narrow definition of what coaching is and what it looks like.
Listen, I find the idea of peer coaching quite interesting, and we're going to touch base a little bit, digging a little bit more if it works or not. But the fact is that corporations are not deploying in a wider scale to the different levels of organization because it's costly. So imagine paying, I don't know, if the average coaching hour is between $80 to $250, and imagine multiplying that by the number of people in a big multinational. So it becomes a little bit, for companies, not something where they can have a return on investment. So is there better ways or something that will alleviate the financial cost of coaching at a wider scale?
Sure. One of the ways is looking at the length of time of the engagement. If they are bringing in an external coach, sometimes there's this idea that we need 6 months, a year, or longer to work with someone. And I think one of the trends is looking at how can we provide just-in-time coaching for people around specific things that they need. So it's a shorter engagement and maybe even shorter bursts of time, because everyone is feeling so overwhelmed with so much to do these days that blocking an hour or 2 hours for a coaching session, when you could think of it as sort of like speed dating, speed coaching. There are situational times when a leader might be dealing with a specific employee or specific situation where they could think, oh my gosh, if I could just speak to somebody and get coaching around this, I could have a breakthrough. Those kinds of just in time, real time kind of coaching opportunities, rather than thinking in terms of a long engagement, can make it more economical. And there are different companies that are providing services like that today.
I'm totally with you. And I'm thinking back to my experiences back in my corporate life. And I remember that because of the lack of resources, it was impossible to forecast how many coaches do we need for the full commercial team. And 5-6 years ago, we didn't have the choice to have this coaching on demand or these applications where we can book a coach on the spot, and it's almost like a service provider where you have like a rental of a given time, and that is something that is allowing, in fact, to scale up in organizations to go quicker and to be fixed up to the point of what is the challenge that the individual is having, instead of having a full life coaching session when we start discovering, I don't know, purpose in life, many challenges that can happen, and it makes it more efficient. So, but the sad reality again is the fact that when you go and you train yourself as a coach, then you have a full process, and the full process is super long. Like, I don't know, when I was trained back in the days, I went to a training facility, and I remember that I had like close to 8 days of coaching dispersed in many days. And we expect that either that most of the coaches are going to follow in this methodology, which seems quite long and is not in line with with what companies want today in terms of agility, doing things on the spot, the lack of time. We want to solve problems today as learners in corporations on the spot, not in my meeting in 2 weeks' time with my coach. Is today, now, I want to have access to my coach. So I have the impression that the methodology, the approach of the traditional coaching is a problem, because most of us have learned this traditional approach that we need longer times, like 1 or 2 sessions to discover what's going on, and maybe we can start activating the relationship in the actions only as of the 3rd coaching session. So 3 hours later, 3 sessions later. So it's quite long, right?
It can be. And, there are some real benefits to that longer term approach. If a company is looking at really investing in someone for the long term in the company, and it's really important that they establish a strong presence, a strong relationship with a lot of stakeholders in the organization, then it makes sense to have that longer term relationship. But, as I was listening to you talk, even I was thinking about another way that organizations can reduce the cost is to really train managers. And I use that term manager as anyone in a leadership role, to help them learn how they can be coaches to their own team members. Because if you think about it, if you were to ask and survey a typical employee and ask them, who would you turn to if you had a problem and you wanted somebody to help coach you through it? I'm curious what percentage of them would respond, oh, my manager. Too often they've experienced their manager as someone who is giving them directives, who's telling them things, and they don't have a perception of that individual as someone who would be an effective coach for them. So one of the best investments I think an organization can make is in teaching managers how to be effective coaches as a part of their role in working with the people on their teams.
Indeed. Now, the fact is that should a manager follow 1 or 3 days training to become a coach, learn the same as a professional coach? Is it too much of a burden, too much of complication, in fact, of following the standard process of coaching? Or should they have something specific that goes a little bit more into the discussion that you mentioned, where it is about more on demand, it's about like the checklist of how to be empathic, how to ask powerful questions that are going to allow that people are going to be opening up. Because remember, the manager is the one who is going to judge your performance. And at the same time, should you trust him with all the mess that sometimes can happen in our heads?
That's such a great question and observation, that yes, I have this person who's going to be evaluating my performance, and do I dare open myself up and appear vulnerable, like I don't have the answer to everything? Is that going to impact? And what that really, I think when we dig deeper there, it really has to do with the culture that has been set up in the organization and the perceived roles of everybody. And so it takes time to create what I would call a coaching culture, where people feel comfortable opening up about a problem they're having or a challenge they're facing, to seek guidance from that person who's also in the role to evaluate them. And I think there are a couple of different things at work here. Number one is we do have this perception that to be an effective coach, you need to be certified. Yeah. Well, if you're going to be a paid professional coach, definitely. But if you're looking at taking on a role of coaching someone as simply a part of the way you interact with them at work, there are really a few basics that can be learned. And they're things that we all do naturally with people we care about in the other parts of our lives, right? So, and there's a couple of key things. One is learning to ask questions. One of the challenges that I think managers face, especially when they are newly in their positions, is they think they have to provide all the answers. That's part of their job, is to be the answer person. So if somebody comes to them, they feel like they need to have the answer, instead of asking questions that help the other person think about it for themselves and often come up with their own solution, because that to me is a core element of coaching. And I can share with your listeners a single question. So it doesn't have to be, memorizing or learning a whole bunch of questions. The essential question is simply asking someone else a version of this one question. What do you think?
Mm,
So if
exactly.
we hold that in our mind, when somebody comes to us, what do you think I ought to do about this? Or I'm facing this, to get to just turn it around and say, well, what do you think? What have you thought about so far in how to handle this? Because I know you've given it some thought before you've come to me. It's also telling about a manager's style. If that manager is feeling overwhelmed by people coming to him or her all the time, because that is instructive. It's a learning moment for that manager to realize, man, I am creating dependence here on me, where people don't feel like they can make simple decisions on their own. So what can I do to help these folks realize they're capable? They can handle this themselves. So I think that's a key element in a coaching role that doesn't need, a huge amount of training. I will say that sending a manager to a 1 or 3 day course, like you were just mentioning, to learn how to be a coach is only the first step.
Mm,
It's really important. And I love your focus, even on your work and in your podcast around neuroscience, because the reality is, for us to acquire and master or get anywhere good at a new behavior, we have to repeat it a lot. And
yeah.
we have to practice it, because we have to build those neural pathways in the brain. And so one of the best ways for a manager to become a good coach is to first be coached. Do they
Mhm.
have someone who has coached them so they feel what it looks like, and, experience what it looks and feels like to have someone coaching them? Because then they have that experience to draw from when they are faced with a situation where they need to coach someone else. If we're just simply in a classroom learning the how-tos, but have never done it, that is not going to stick. We can leave and we'll forget that information a few days later and revert to what we've always done and what's comfortable, because that's the established neural pathway we have.
You have just opened the Pandora box. And that's culture. If if a company doesn't have the culture of coaching, then nobody's going to be really enabled. It's like I have seen in many companies that yes, they want to devote resources in order to equip managers to be coaches, but they put them into a training. And they expect that after the training, they're going to be capable of doing that. But you said it. If you are not coach, you don't know how to. You don't have the possibility to reflect, to generate insight. And basically, it's also by observing that we start practicing. And then maybe while they start the practice themselves with their direct reports, that they have the possibility to receive feedback, right? Did I do it correctly? Did I ask the right question? I felt that I wasn't connecting, that there wasn't too much empathy. Oh, I get a little bit stuck up with certain questions that are too personal. To have someone to help them reflect, to make the mirror on how they're doing. No practice, it doesn't come. Coaching is a meta skill. As you said, we do that with people that we care. But employees, direct reports, usually, yes, we care, but it's not like our family. And sometimes we tend not to believe either in my own capabilities as a coach. Oh, I'm not capable. I'm not that empathic, or I'm a little bit introvert or whatsoever, or in the capabilities of others, like saying, yeah, he will not change. It's a waste of time, right? So it happens.
It does. And, I love some of these points that you're making, because if we can switch our thinking, from, oh, I'm not good at this, or I don't think I can do this because I'm, whatever label we put on ourselves. Oh, I'm introverted. I'm not a people person. I'm not this or that. And instead say, what can I do to serve this person in this moment? What would naturally be of help to them? And if we can have that attitude, it relieves a lot of pressure about needing to perform in a certain way.
Mm,
Because, what we really, the whole goal of coaching is to help people, one, remove blind spots that they might have because we can see things that the other person doesn't, and then to ask questions that help them discover things they may not have acknowledged about themselves. Because ultimately, we want people to be able to realize their full potential. We want them to be resourceful, independent thinkers who are high performers. And the way that we can do that is through asking questions that help them discover solutions themselves and also learn from their experiences. Because too often, we go from one thing to another to another. So whether it's a manager who just had a coaching session with someone and now they need to process how it went, or a manager who is coaching someone else to learn from a mistake that they just made, there are some basic questions they can ask, and I'll share them with you because they're not complicated and they're just so useful. And this can work, by the way, for parents too, when their child has done something and it didn't go well or they really made a mistake. Here's just these few questions. What happened? Tell me about what happened. What was the sequence of events? And then getting the person to explain, well, why do you think it happened that way? What were you thinking? What was your motive? What was going on with you and the other person from your perspective? And then what were the consequences? How did that work out? Did you get the outcome you were hoping for? Or did something else happen that you wished hadn't happened? And then the fourth question is, so what did you learn from this that you'll do differently next time? And those simple questions, taking the time to slow down and process that, it has an amazing effect on being able to let go of a mistake. Too often we beat ourselves up. Oh, I really messed that up. I didn't do this well. If we take the time to process for ourselves or to process with someone else, then there's a learning, there's a takeaway that we can now apply the next time we're in a similar situation. If we don't do that, then we're likely to, repeat the same mistake over and over because we didn't take time to process it.
indeed. I like the point that you made about peer coaching. So managers helping their direct reports, or maybe coaching someone like one of your colleagues. And that these people do not need to have a certification. It needs to be, is one, a mindset that they need to create, and mindset created through repetition. The second point is about practice, practice, practice. They need to be coached themselves or go through the experience of coaching. And it made me think a little bit about the book that you wrote, Peer Coaching Made Simple, where you talk about 6 things that makes it, that's something that is implementable, where it's not about getting the certification, where you don't have to read at least the most used 500 questions in coaching, but it is about something that it is more practical. Can you tell me a little bit more about this book? What can I get out of the book if I want to start being a coach as a manager?
Sure. Well, one of the things that we've done is like you said, we have 6 different simple things that people can do, and none of these are foreign to somebody. It's not like these are brand new, you've never heard of them, like accountability. And this is where you and another person agree that you're going to meet at a whatever interval of frequency. And it doesn't have to be time consuming. That's the other beauty. People feel so overwhelmed these days with so much to do. I don't need to add one more thing, but it's checking in with someone. You make a commitment to do something in particular, a skill, let's say, that you're going to be working on. Maybe it's something as simple as listening and not interrupting, right? that I tend to jump in and finish people's sentences, and I want to get away from that. So I'm going to work with you, Yvonne. You're going to be my partner, and every week we're going to get together, and I'm going to report back to you. How did I do with that? And so in that role of being a peer coach, you're holding that person accountable and asking, what did you do? How did it go? But also you are listening and then asking questions that help the other person to think for themselves. You are providing feedback. Maybe you observed them. If you're a coworker, maybe you were in the meeting with them when they jumped in. And so you can provide firsthand feedback to them. You also can offer encouragement, because when we're trying to, improve a skill, we're not going to get it right every time. That's part of the practice.
Yeah.
And so if we ever have a setback and we feel discouraged, the role of a peer coach can also be to offer encouragement, which simply means, pointing out the person's positives, other things they've done, because we lose perspective when we start getting, down on ourselves. And so what we've done in this book is we outline these behaviors, these skills, but we also give sample dialogues of what it looks like in action. So they don't have to imagine, well, I don't know what I'd say. So we have these realistic exchanges between two people that are being peer coaches to each other and sharing, here's how someone might talk to you about it, and here's how you might respond that would be a positive, supportive way. So it's using everyday work situations that everyone can relate to without it being theoretical. There's no theory, there's no conceptual, it's all very concrete and practical.
I have the impression that when you're doing coaching, on top of helping the development, the development in different areas is not only about discussing work related about my professional career, but also sometimes personal, sometimes even spiritual, which is quite positive because we start connecting. So it's almost like a support for the culture that we want to do. If we want to develop a culture of trust, generate oxytocin and all the stuff in the team, so we want to connect with them. And I think also helps people, especially managers, because of the more we progress in a corporation, we become a little bit more like floating in the sky, demigods or whatsoever. And it allows us to have a little bit of touch base with vulnerability because we feel it. We feel it from the other. And it can happen that as a manager, you can share something that happened to you to your direct report. Gosh, this is good.
Yes. Oh, I love this point that you just made, because, sometimes people in a leadership role feel this self-imposed pressure many times that I have to be this certain way. I have to appear perfect. And so that prevents them from admitting when they make a mistake. It prevents them from apologizing, when they've said something that was maybe upsetting to someone else. If we can set aside all of that because we have this realization, trust is built when people can connect with us and feel that we're a human being too. And so the more we're willing to share of ourselves, of our own experiences, of our own mistakes, they feel more comfortable opening up to us. It sometimes seems counterintuitive. If I open myself up, I'm going to make myself vulnerable and then they'll take advantage of me. But the actual opposite is what happens. When we're willing to open up to people and say, wow, I really made a mistake, I apologize, then others feel safe to come to us and say, I made a mistake here. They're not going to cover it up. They're not going to try to blame someone else. So you start creating this environment of open, honest communication where trust becomes a foundation. And that's really the only way that you can build a coaching culture, is when people trust that they can say things in an open way and not have a negative repercussion happen as a result of being honest themselves.
I was wondering, because we had a little bit of a pre-discussion before this episode, and I wanted to understand. So I mentioned to you that something that is happening quite a lot in the region is that, today, if you want, you can become coach online. So doing like a e-learning, and you have a XYZ certification. So it is becoming difficult for organizations to decide how to onboard what type of coaches they require in order to have substantial results, and not to have someone who is going to stay there just to have accumulation of number of hours with one person, because some people needs to talk. But okay, we have friends and wives and partners or whatsoever to have the discussions. But if it is about how to make myself better, I need a professional that is going to bring me results quite quickly. And so it is almost like it's going to look funny. It looks like being in Mexico City. You put your hand, and then there is 10 taxis. In here, in the Middle East, you put the HR person puts the hand, and then there is 10 coaches that arrive on the spot, because there is overproduction of coaches, especially during COVID. My God, I have seen coaches from everywhere. So how can I, as an HR person, how can I take a decision about what certification? There is so many, by the way. I don't understand basically what is the difference between one or the other. And especially, I don't know if this certification is like an insurance that they are up to date with the latest. I mean, in the last 10 years, we have seen positive psychology that is being a little bit more accessible, neuroscience. And do we know how to choose in between all these names around certifications in coaching?
You know, such an excellent question. And I would say the first thing to do is back up a minute before you start looking at who should I choose. Why do we want coaches? Ask some questions up front about what are we experiencing that causes us to say we need to bring in an outside coach to work with either one person or a team of people, individually, or even do group coaching, because that's also a very cost-effective way to provide coaching. So what is it we're trying to accomplish? What is it that's not happening now, where we have a gap between where we want to be and where we are now? What is it that a coach can do for us? So asking these questions up front will help you get greater clarity about what's the role the coach can serve for us. And that way you can develop criteria that guide your selection of the right coach. In other words, certification is just one part. Do you want someone who has experience in your industry so that they know the language, they know the challenges that you are experiencing, or does that not matter? So asking questions, in other words, what are the qualifications that would be important for us with this person? And another element might be their experience. How many years have they been a coach? Who have they worked with? What kind of reputation do they have? And asking for references and checking with former clients to see what was it like working with this person. So you do your due diligence also, because I think sometimes we can get enamored with all these different letters after somebody's name, but does that really tell us how effective they'll be with, say, this particular executive or this particular individual or group of individuals? And so just taking the time to think what's important to us and why would be, I think, saving a lot of time down the road than just hearing about someone and saying, oh, this is a person, or feeling overwhelmed by so many choices. You can narrow it down by looking at, and what's our budget? Of course, that's another piece to look at, because you can eliminate some coaches just because their fees are higher than what you can do. So seeing what's on your checklist, which are really requirements, which are nice to haves, will help make it easier for you to narrow down your selection and choose somebody that's really the best fit.
Meredith, thank you very much for your answer. I wanted to understand. So let's imagine that we have some magic and we move like 10, 20 years from now, and we try to imagine the evolution of coaching. So today, coaching has got a good traction, and it is a mix of how much we have understood about how the brain works, the implication of positive psychology, and then there is this now mega groups of online coaching like Better Up offering, I mean, a combination of, so they have made kind of coaching a little bit more scientific because they have possibility to measure the impact of what they do. They have a process that seems quite solid. So if we had to imagine in 10 years from now how coaching is going to be changing, what would you see in 10 years?
Wow. It's hard to say what we'll see in 1 year with the way things accelerate
Exactly.
so much. But here's the thing. I don't care how many years you go into the future, the need for positive human interaction is always going to be there because we're social animals.
Mm.
And so I know that, some companies have technologies where they use artificial intelligence to generate, appropriate responses. And that can be useful. It's never going to take the place of a human being
Mm.
who's able to really sense everything about you. And so I guess my hope would be that companies recognize the ability of everyone in their organization to be able to serve in a coaching role. And one of the key aspects of measuring the effectiveness of that is really retention. How
Exactly.
many people are staying with us because we've created an environment that supports them as they are trying new things, whether it's a new position we've put them in or a new project they're working on. What have we done to provide that support? Because another word for coaching is support. They're not synonyms, but it's a key piece of it is having someone you can count on that's got your back, that's going to help you in this moment, in this situation, to work through whatever it is that you might be dealing with where you need some help. And so I think retention is a key aspect. And hopefully the organizations that recognize the need to really grow and change are taking those measures. And I can give you a quick real example from the University of California in Berkeley, because I recently interviewed their chief learning officer on my podcast. And any of your listeners that want to catch that, her name is Angela Stopper, and it's episode 170 on Grow Strong Leaders podcast. They have totally created the kind of culture that you and I have been talking about today. It took a lot of work. It's taken a lot of time. They've turned their annual performance appraisal upside down to where now a part of the manager's role is to coach the person on developing as a part of their, performance conversations. And it's not just a once a year thing. But you know what they did? One of the things they did is they actually recorded, like Angela and another person on her team coaching each other, and role playing, so those managers would have something concrete to follow in doing this. And they provided a lot of training and support. And of course, they had some resistors. Not everybody said, "Oh, I'm so glad we're doing this," because that's it's a major change. They had realistic expectations. They did a pilot where they got buy-in, they were able to tweak the system and really produce something that they now call achieve together instead of, appraisal. And so it has a whole different feel to it for both the manager and the employee. This to me is the future, where organizations really understand the importance of developing their people. In fact, they have a whole program called Grow, where they provide just-in-time kinds of training for employees at all levels to help them and support them in their own growth and development. And so the managers play a key role in that. So I think if you are, looking to the future at what does it look like for an organization where people are thriving and they're staying and they're contributing at the highest level, that university represents a great example of what can be.
I love this example. It's very human driven, and you are right. It's not about so much about the expectations that what technology can deliver for us. I do not believe that artificial intelligence, by the way, can replace a real human connection. But I do believe that it helps to reach a scale. Like for instance, having online bookings of coaching sessions on demand, to have like a reporting system that allows me to see, am I progressing in that specific skill that I'm working on the spot with my coach? That is something that I do believe that it is making good, because it's increasing the accessibility to coaching. You mentioned something that is quite curious, and because I'm quite cynical, Meredith. So you mentioned that we are social animals. We were social animals since the beginning of humanity, but coaching became important only when COVID started, and we saw that the need for human connection was there, and we haven't done enough. And suddenly, human resources department, CEOs started panicking because nobody was ready to work remotely with new processes, to be alone, to don't have a sense of belonging with the rest of the community at work. And we were a little bit like depressed on that. And suddenly they decided that, yes, developing people is about also helping them, supporting them, not only with their mental well-being, but also with all the skills that they need to acquire to communicate better, to be more human inside of a corporation. So COVID was like a kind of big lesson and a slap for many corporations. That's a fact. Meredith, I wanted to have one of my last questions, and I wanted to understand what would be your message for the skeptics and the disappointed about coaching? Is there any message that you can pass to these people who had bad experiences about coaching?
Yes. Being realistic about what coaching is and can be and the positive effects of it is really dependent on both people. The person who is serving as the coach and the person who is being coached. That willingness to be open, honest, and direct, and recognizing that getting good at coaching takes time. It's again that whole rewiring of the brain where because a part of what's natural to us, Ivan, is when we see someone having a problem, or in pain, it's that natural instinct to want to fix it, and coaching is the opposite of fixing, right? It's asking questions, it's drawing out that other person. And if we understand what really good coaching consists of from coming with that spirit, then it's possible for real transformations to happen, because people are discovering within themselves by great questions being asked of them some of their real capabilities, some of what's really possible that they may not have appreciated before. And it takes time. And I think that's one of the things, time to get good at the skill, but also time to slow down long enough to ask questions and connect with someone else. What you were just saying about COVID and all the things that did, the organizations that really either didn't skip a beat or they didn't skip them for very long, were the ones where they connected with the human side of what was going on with each person in the organization. So they took the time to ask, what's happening with you right now? How do we need to support you with having your kids home, trying to do school from home? There were all these variables that were impacting performance. And one of the ways that can relieve the stress and pressure on both sides is simply to have a frank discussion about what's going on, so you can get creative about, well, what can we do to support you in this situation? And so I think the answer for your skeptics is, what is the spirit I'm bringing to this whole concept of coaching and this environment where coaching can take place? Because if you both are coming with the right spirit's the right word to me, because it's the heart, the mind that is open to sharing, to caring, to being there for this other human being. You know, that to me is just good relationship building. That's the essence of it.
Thank you, Meredith. I love the points that you have made. I just wanted to summarize something. So, first of all, how to reach you, Meredith. One possibility is your website, growstrongleaders.com, where you can have access to the 2 books that she has written. One of them is Connect with Your Team, Mastering the Top 10 Communication Skills. The second one is Peer Coaching Made Simple. That is something that I definitely have to read, because I'm convinced, as you say, that the future is not about technology, it's not about outsourcing big teams of coaches, but it's about developing the skills and the culture, as you pointed out quite well, the culture inside of the organization. You cannot have just throw coaches with training without changing the culture, the perception of what do you want to build, what do you aspire in terms of behaviors, values, and mindset for your organization. Is there any other way, Meredith, to reach you out?
Well, I'm on LinkedIn quite a lot. I post there regularly, and I'm also on Facebook and Twitter. LinkedIn is probably where I'm the most active. And as you mentioned, our website, growstrongleaders.com, has information about our books, our products. We have assessment and development tools. And then also my podcast is there.
Oh, yes.
So that's a one-stop place that people can go. And I have a button there for schedule a call if someone has a question and would like to talk to me about any aspect of this. I'm happy to have that conversation.
Meredith, it was a great conversation. I admire for me, it's like almost discussing with a guru on what it means coaching, and also something that we haven't discussed and maybe we could discuss in another time is about the power of communication inside of in order to develop the culture, and it has to do a lot with coaching, but it's not communication like how to present a PowerPoint presentation. It's about how to be efficiently communication with leaders, right?
Yes, absolutely. And like I said, effectively connecting with another person.
Yeah, exactly.
That's really the key.
Thank you, Meredith, for your time. It was lovely to have you in this episode of Learn with Bessern. Thank you very much.
Thank you.